The best estimate by leading vaccine producers is that it could take a year or more to develop, test, and manufacture a vaccine for the clade X
virus. We have heard that 500,000 children have died. You know, is the price worth it? We think the price is worth it.
Richie Brown Show.
Veteran journalist Jackie Devoy and Diplomatic Post founder Richie Brown have recently released a very powerful documentary on what really goes on behind closed doors within the medical establishment. Unseen, the truth behind death protocols exposes deadly medical protocols masquerading as care pathways in UK hospitals and care homes. Jackie and Richie join us now. Jackie, the COVID era opened a lot of people's eyes to, end of life protocols. But this is nothing new, is it?
No, not at all. It's been going on for decades, maybe even longer than decades. I think the first thing people heard about these sort of end-of-life pathways was probably back in the 1920s with the Brompton cocktail. It was almost something they joked about, if someone was in terrible pain, terminally ill, literally on their last legs, then they would give them a mixture of morphine, probably alcohol and cocaine. Sometimes I think they used in it as well, and they'd just neck that and then they'd drift off. But what we've seen in the last 5 years, which is very alarming, is that people have been put on these death pathways, as I call them, when they're not terminally ill, when they're not in any serious pain, and have died as a result. So that's something that I started looking into back in 2020. And by 2021, as you know, we made the film A Good Death with Iconic. And that's been seen by millions worldwide now, I do believe. But more people are aware of what's going on now, definitely. And it is still happening. It was really ramped up in 2020 and 2021. I set up a support group. It's got nearly 200 people in that group now, all saying the same thing. And I've spoken to probably about 1,000 more over the last 5 years. People who are saying their loved ones were actually killed in hospitals and care homes.
It's extraordinary. It really is. Richie, what inspired you to make the documentary? Is it kind of like we want to get justice, or is there also this goal of, well, actually, if we expose this to the wider public, maybe we can try and put a stop to this?
Definitely want to put a stop to it is one of the main aims of the documentary. I mean, when I first heard of this was maybe a year and a bit ago from a wonderful woman called Michelle Sterling, who founded Friends of Science. And she goes through a lot of the kind of false science in the climate hoax thing, where they try to present that as an existential crisis. And anyway, she mentioned it as offhand comment, and that was the first time I really heard of it from someone I knew and respected, rather than just seeing like something on the internet. And then following that, I checked out some of Jackie's work and invited her on for a podcast where we discussed her 2 previous documentaries, and she mentioned that she had loads of people that wanted to tell their story. So we thought, why not film these people and get their stories out there? Because this is, I mean, when you hear the stories for yourself, you see how beyond ridiculous it is that they're essentially putting these people to death for no good reason whatsoever. I mean, during the COVID period, this has been going on since the Liverpool Care Pathway, which was abolished for all of these kind of abuses that were going on at the time. But for COVID, it was ramped up. And if you follow the kind of pattern during 2020 and up to 2022, 23, they were putting COVID on all these death certificates. So they're almost, and these aren't, I mean, some of them are kind of elderly or old, as some people will view it, but I don't think their time was not up as it was. They had, I think they would have lived, some of these people would have lived for maybe decades afterwards. So yeah, putting a stop to it is definitely, and just getting their voices out there, because not many people even know this is going on.
I must admit, that was one thing when we did a Midazolam episode with Jackie and with people that Jackie had sourced, and they came onto the show, they told the story. And one of the real takeaways for me for that was when we put the interview out, is I was getting messages from people that I knew, from back on the Isle of Wight when I lived there, people from Derby, that were going, mate, I've just watched that Midazolam episode you released. And these, by the way, are not people that would generally be tinfoil hat like me, And they were going, I never thought of it like this, because obviously they're trained to trust the white coat, but I swear this is what happened to my uncle, or I swear this is what happened to my gran. I'm going to look into it. And so it's so much more common. I mean, see, Jackie, you've been speaking to relatives of those affected for a long time. I know, you set up Facebook groups that had like thousands of people in. Just how big are we talking in terms of numbers? Because, one is too many to be euthanized by the state, of course, but are we talking thousands? Are we talking hundreds of thousands? How big are we going?
Well, I wrote an article for The Light a couple of months ago, and it was based around the work of Wilson Tsai. I don't know if you've had him on your show, but he did some very in-depth research into all this stuff that was going on in the UK. And he said it's a minimum of 55,000 by his calculations were killed during that period. It's still going on. I'm still getting people contacting me now saying, that it's already happened to a loved one of theirs, or it's in the process of happening, and what should they do? It's really alarming when you get calls like that, because you have to drop everything and try and give them advice. Quite recently, a friend of mine, she's a journalist called Laura Beryl, and she's actually in Unseen, the film, talking about what happened to her mother just after Christmas last year. She came to me saying, my mum's, I think they've put her on an end-of-life pathway. She'd watched some of my stuff and read some of my articles and said, what shall I do? And I said, well, if you don't get her out of there within 2 to 3 days, they'll kill her. And she couldn't get her out. So, and she died within like 2.5, 3 days. And it's absolutely awful when you're in that situation, because they really try and talk you out of taking them out of hospital. And something else that I've learned only recently is that, and that was through listening to Ken McCarthy, who wrote What the Nurses Saw, who's also featured in the film Unseen. Richie interviewed him. He said that once you go into hospital, usually if you're going in for a minor procedure, you can leave anytime you like. But once they give you drugs, once they give you like any kind of anesthetic drugs or analgesic drugs or any kind of sedatives or psychoactive drugs, you're not allowed to leave. You become their responsibility. And if you leave, you're a liability then. So they keep you in, and no one can get you out. So it's really terrifying. Once they do give people these end-of-life drugs, they're not allowed to leave. So Laura tried to get her mum out, but they talked her out of it basically, and within a couple of days she was dead. And it's still going on, but not as much as it was when I was being inundated. I did a podcast with your dad in December 2020, talking about the elderly in care homes and what's happening to them. And after that, I started getting a lot of people coming to me. So, it's still happening, but people are waking up to it, which 5 years ago they were horrified by it, but now I'll talk to my local hairdresser or the landlord in the pub, and they'll go, oh yeah, I've heard about this. So people are waking up to it. And a lot of people are going legal now. It was very, very difficult to do that, to get a lawyer on side, because they'd be up against the NHS, up against the government. Not many wanted to take that on. We've got one case actually that's been going now for the last few years. There's an inquest next week, the 11th to the 15th of August at Southwark Coroner's Court in London. It's a public inquest, so the family would love people to come along. It's the Dimmock family. They would love people to come along and support them if possible. And it is public, like I said, so if anyone can get down to that Southwark Coroner's Court from the 11th to the 15th of August, that would be good.
Richie, where do you stand in terms of a justice for this? So, because I'm thinking, okay, well, who's ordering it from the top? But then who's carrying it out? Because a human being needs to do that. A human being needs to put a syringe driver into another human being and pump that person full of drugs that kills them. And so for you personally, what would justice look like? I know it's difficult for you to say because you're not in a position where it's one of your family members or whatever, but what would it look like for you? Are we talking mass arrests?
I think so, yeah. I mean, you look at the NG163 and NG191, those two documents kind of outline how this has become so prevalent. Like they even have in NG191, they even have remdesivir for treating COVID, which was, killed 54% of the people in the Ebola trials. That's when they stopped using it, and somehow they brought it back for COVID. So you can see the profit motive behind wanting to use that much remdesivir on supposedly COVID patients. But the NICE governance, so the NG documents, that stands for NICE governance, and that goes straight back to the Health Secretary. So it's set up as a kind of, you think, as an organisation separate to the government, but no, it reports directly back to the Health Secretary. So this goes right to the top of the government. And as for the people implementing it, I mean, I think they do have a duty. But as kind of Ken McCarthy points out in the documentary, and some of it didn't make the documentary, was cut in the podcast, which is just on my YouTube channel. And he discusses how the protocol was implemented, because the doctors and nurses no longer really run hospitals or run patient care. They're governed by these protocols, and it's really the hospital administrator that owns and governs these hospitals and demands that you implement these protocols. And if you don't implement them, then you're out. You're blackballed, you're fired, you're in breach of not following that particular protocol. So I mean, at the end of the day, it does come from the top, and the people in the middle should be held accountable to the same standard. And some people were very brave. I mean, in Ken McCarthy's book, he mostly interviewed nurses, but after the book came out, he started speaking to a lot of the families. But the nurses would do all sorts to try and sort of get people out of that situation. Like there's one scene in Ken McCarthy's book where a nurse basically sees that they've got long-term care on their file, understands that to mean a fast track to remdesivir and ventilator, which is either going to blow your lungs out or cause you kidney or liver failure. So she sort of shuffled him out the back exit and called his family, and they picked him up. So, but unfortunately, there wasn't enough of that going on. But again, a lot of very strange stuff happened during that period. Like, well, in America at least, from Ken's book, and I'm sure it's the same here, a lot of migrants were flown in to cover the supposed COVID emergency, and they were just waived into working into ICUs when they had qualifications from a foreign country, which is normally not the case. Normally, if you have a doctorate in a different country, you have to redo the entire thing in America, and I'm sure that was the same case here. So, yeah, I mean, it goes right to the top because the NG documents were written by essentially the Health Secretary of the UK,
Matt Hancock.
And then he gets a gig on I'm a Celebrity.
I wonder if sometimes he didn't kill enough people, and that was his process of humiliation, his humiliation ritual, to pay for the fact that he didn't do the job good enough. I mean, he was quoted as saying he wanted to be the person who chooses who should live and who should die. That's on record, and we mentioned that in the film as well. And
it's a psychopathic thing to say.
Everything he says is psychopathic. I mean, I've been involved in a campaign to get him back into court as well, because when he was in court back in June 23, he committed perjury, and that's never been addressed. Matt Hancock said back in 23, when he was in court, that he'd never heard of midazolam, and he didn't know why people were shouting midazolam mat at him in the street and accusing him of killing people with this drug. And he said he'd never heard of it, but we've got him on a video talking to Dr. Luke Evans about ordering more midazolam. So that was in 2020, in April 2020. So he clearly lied in court, and he needs to be held accountable for that. And
100%. We're going to play the trailer now, but just before we do, where can people watch Unseen? Because I know you've got it up for a period of time for free, and then it's being put elsewhere. So where can people watch it?
It's on YouTube. It's got about 15,000 views so far, which is pretty good because we only released it at the end of July. And we've also put a director's cut on Patreon. It includes extended and unedited interviews with all the people who contributed to the film Unseen. Some of the interviews are about an hour long, hour and a half long. So if you watch Unseen and you want to know more about one of the families that is speaking in the film, then you can actually go over to Patreon and download it for yourself and watch the extended director's cut.
That's fantastic. Thank you both for joining us. Like I say, we'll play the trailer now. So this is the trailer for Unseen.